Hi, it's Paul Guppy with the Washington Policy Center with our regular update of issues that are going on that affect everybody in our state. As always, please like, subscribe, and share. Also post comments. I love reading the comments on our videos, so please do that. I'm going to hit 4 issues today. One is the first school strike has already hit. Next is our governor has responded to the national proposal on school choice. We'll see what he has to say. Thirdly is there's some turmoil, staff turnover in the governor's office. I'll look at those details. And then lastly is a longer trend that we've been concerned about here at Washington State and at the Washington Policy Center, which is Washington State losing its mojo? And we have some numbers on that, and I'll take a look at that. So first off, already the public school year is starting this week and or right after Labor Day, and already we have our first school strike is happening in the Evergreen Public School District. That's in Clark County near Vancouver, Washington, in the southern part of the state. And it's not the teachers union that's going on strike, although they might as well, because the effect is the same. It is the support staff at the school, the union there, called a strike just on the verge, literally days before school was meant to start. Of course, the timing is on purpose to create maximum disruption and leverage for the union in the contract negotiations that they're going through. Of course, immediately, in a spirit of labor solidarity, the teachers union announced, well, they're going to respect the strike as well. So that's the same as a teacher's strike, is that the teachers are going to stay home as well. And so the school is completely shut down. Regarding the school district itself, it has had its headaches down in the Evergreen School District. Similar trend is happening across the state, and that is the following. Families are leaving the system. Evergreen School District enrollment is down 18% in the last 10 years. That means about 400 students a year have left the system. Of course, what that means is per student funding has also been going down. That comes from the state. And so they would argue that they're, quote, short on money. Of course, if you have fewer students, you don't need as much money. So what is the need for the dispute? The other thing that the attitude about this is that public budgets are seen as forever funding. It's like your age. It only goes up, never goes down. And that's the attitude that most units of government have. By the way, the leaders of the school district, the school board, which is elected to represent the interests of taxpayers and families and students, says that they are all on board with trying to settle this strike, and they will no doubt make financial concessions in order to get these support staff and then the teachers back to work. So in a way, it's not really a two-sided dispute. It's more like a 1.5-sided, in that the administration is already sympathetic with the workers and willing to concede to what they want. But the overall effect of this is to drive even more families out of the public system, and that trend is continuing. So as the public system is involved in conflict, what parents do quite rationally is that they begin to say, what are our alternatives? What other choices do we have? We think that effect is really leading to the broader school choice movement across the country, which is rapidly expanding. And it's as if the officials inside the system are tone deaf to this effect. They think that the public is just going to suck up the conflict, the strikes, the school shutdowns, and go with it. And I think people's patience is beginning to run out about that. And speaking of school choice, we have our illustrious governor has finally responded to the proposal, the law signed by President Trump that creates free scholarships for students across the country, $1,700 tax credit for anyone who donates money to a nonprofit, and that nonprofit then turns around and gives scholarships to kids. The way it's set up, however, is that the governors of the 50 states have to proactively participate in the program. And Governor Ferguson has been asked and pressed about this. Will you allow Washington to participate? And he has finally given his response, which is a little vague, but also negative. And I'll just give the straight quote that he put out. He said, "I'm deeply skeptical of a voucher program that would harm our public school system. I have directed my team to analyze whether we can use these funds, the Trump school choice scholarships, in a way that benefits public school students." That's his statement. He doesn't give a flat no, but he definitely sounds, as he says, deeply skeptical about this program. He makes 2 mistakes here. Number one, he mislabels, or he falsely calls it a voucher program. It's not a voucher program. It's a voluntary tax credit program. Taxpayer gives a donation to a nonprofit, as I said, gets the tax credit. The donor can live in any state, but the recipient families must be in a state that has been approved by their own governor, and that's where Governor Ferguson comes in. The second mistake he makes is he says he wants his team to, quote, analyze whether we can use these funds. He doesn't seem to understand how the program works. These are not state funds. As I said, it's a tax credit. But more disturbing than that is his attitude that somehow the government has to be in control all the time. This program is designed so that the government specifically is not in control. Nonprofits and families make the decisions about how the money is going to be used. And that's the benefit of it, the flexibility and the empowerment that families receive. But Governor Ferguson is stuck in this old think socialist idea that these funds, as he calls them, need to be controlled by the state. The state doesn't have any control. The one thing that Governor Ferguson is being asked to do, and I hope that he'll consider this with an open mind, and that is sign a one-page letter that says Washington State is in, that Washington school children are allowed to participate and receive these scholarship funds. It doesn't cost the state a single penny, and as a matter of fact, for every student who accepts a free scholarship, frees up our own public resources in the state for the public education system. So there's actually a financial benefit that comes along with it. We'll see how he comes out on that. It is literally a win-win-win. Win for taxpayers, win for kids, and win for the public welfare of getting a better education. And then lastly, I'll mention what Superintendent Reichdahl says, the highest school official in the state. Of course, he is absolutely against this. He is a classic defender of the monopoly. And he says that letting Washington school children gain access to these free scholarships would be, quote, reckless. So he's already made his decision. He is opposed, but the person who makes the decision is the governor. And again, we'll see how he comes out on that. Next issue also involves the governor. There's been some buzz in Olympia about turmoil in the governor's office. There's been high staff turnover. This is reported in the Washington State Standard by Jerry Cornfield, who's one of the best political reporters in the state. He reports that Ferguson's top policy advisor is taking leave until the end of the year. In addition to that, they've also lost their legislative director, the deputy legislative director, and the chief of staff have all left this year for various different reasons that I won't go into. A lot of it involves gossip, but you can see that, and the people who have left have said there's a toxic working environment in the governor's office. Now, these accusations go back and forth, and I never judge whether they're true or not. We are just looking at what is the external overall effect, and that is any kind of churning in a leadership office is a bad sign for that leadership style. When I worked in Congress, there were sort of two kinds of offices. One in which the staff never left, so there were like hardly any openings there if you were applying for a job. And then other offices that had very high turnover, sometimes as much as 100% in 1 year. And if you were a staff professional like me, you did not want to work in one of those places because there was an indication that it was dysfunctional or the boss was impossible to work with or who knows what it is. This is also a problem that Vice President Kamala Harris had in her office during the Bush administration. Very high staff turnover. We're not saying where this is going to lead, but it is a concern that after 8 months in office, Governor Ferguson's operation has not settled down. Now, these positions that I've mentioned have been filled, so he is moving ahead with getting people in place, and we'll hope that everything works out. But high staff loyalty is a sign of strong ethical leadership, and the opposite is a sign that there are problems, and that could eventually affect the governing of our state, and that's why we're keeping an eye on it. Last issue I'll touch on is Washington State losing our mojo? So as I've mentioned before, and I grew up in Washington State, there was always a feeling of optimism, innovation, and progress that is shared by the culture of the Western states. Certainly California, Oregon, Washington, even other Western states have always had this sense for more than 100 years, literally going back to pioneer days, that we are building a better future. This is the golden opportunity, the American dream. That has always been the attitude, and that has largely been true. Innovation, economic growth, opportunity, in addition to the natural beauty of our area. That's why people want to live here. For the first time in history, as far as I can tell, that is turning around. Our population is flattening. California has lost population. Oregon and Washington together have lost about 40,000 residents in the last 10 years, that's net. So, in the census, that's not very much. It looks like a flat trend. But the fact that we're not growing as we did before, and I predict that we're going to lose a congressional seat in the next reapportionment census in 2030, are all signs that the bloom is off the Western states, and these are not seen as an area of opportunity anymore. And then I looked up just one indicator, and that is national reading test scores for fourth graders. I checked this morning just to see where do we rank among the 50 states, and on that one indicator, we are about in the middle. We used to be in the top 10, 7th, 8th. Now we're more like 35th, 36th in reading. I also looked at the states that are ahead of us. No surprise, these are the states that are beginning to look like the opportunity, future innovation and opportunity that we used to be, and that's where I'm seeing that shift. Those states are Florida, Texas, Mississippi, Kentucky, Montana, Idaho. Every one of those has higher fourth grade reading skills than Washington State does. And again, that's just one benchmark, but I think there's a pattern that's larger than that. So we are slipping, and the reason I bring this up is this trend can happen so slowly that the general public and even our elected leaders either deny that it's happening or are just asleep at the switch. And then one day we wake up and Washington is well behind and has major problems. So we're trying to raise attention about that right now. With that, I'll wrap up and mention some of our exciting events that are coming up. One is our big gala annual dinner on September 11th in Bellevue. That will almost certainly sell out. So if you're interested, please go to our website and check that out. We are doing a policy event in Moses Lake on September 17th. Our young professionals group is also having an unplugged social event in Bellevue on September 18th. They have one a little later on in Spokane. These are very relaxed, very fun. And then also for the first time this year, in October, the Young Professionals Group is going to have their own separate gala dinner that will also be a lot of fun. So we have some exciting get-togethers coming up. If anyone is interested in that, please check out our website at washingtonpolicy.org under the Events tab. And thanks for listening.
If you found this informative, share it with a friend and consider checking out one of our suggested videos over here. Make sure you're subscribed so that you can stay up to date with the latest policy news from Washington.